Mr. Chair.
Or not adopt.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are adopted. The Finance Committee agenda it's only that big, but there's a lot in there. So I advise you, make your comments count and get them to the point. Old business, item number 1, Tuscaloosa Public Library funding. Ms. Pearson, welcome back.
Thank you.
Getting to see a lot of you lately.
All right.
And your sidekick
Yeah.
over there.
Chauffeur.
So when we left last session, and I think a good part of 2 sessions, we've talked about this, and it's very clear the intent of this committee is to help and make this work. I think the
I'm just
thing.
doing, go ahead. I'm just getting to where I need to be.
Okay, so I think where we left it was, y'all had showed us a chart that, Mr. Winter showed us a chart, and it showed us what the actual funding had been for like the last 8 or 10 years, and then it kind of factored inflation into that, and the takeaway is you're being underfunded. We have a commitment in the past, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 15, that the city would make the contribution to make the Bolden Weaver branch work. We noted, but I don't think we got to, or maybe we did, we noted there had been a drop in checkouts, door count, whatever it is, they were both pretty close. And what it amounted to at the end, when the dust settled from that, given your current ask, I think about 32% of your funding was being attributed to the Bolden Weaver branch, which accounted for 7% of your usage. Am I in the ballpark memory-wise?
Yes.
Because I'm frequently not.
Yes, you're right.
I think another thing that's clear is the city is going to honor what it said it was going to do. I do want to get into a little bit, well, it looks like you go through this
Okay,
chart with us,
so-
and then I want to talk about how you came up with the dollar number, okay? Because you and I and Brian talked about privately, obviously you can allocate some of your costs to general overhead. I want to talk about that, but get us through this one, please.
Okay, so one of the things y'all had asked about is service by hour. So this is our door count by hour, and you can see we did comparative months in 2019 and 2022. So that kind of gives you an idea there what's where people are coming or what times they're coming in. So we've included that, and then I'm going backwards. Sorry, wrong button. So this is the current operation, and the additional cost total would be a little over $49,000. This would be 22 hours a week, and this is what we're currently doing: 3 days a week, Monday 9 to 7, Wednesday 9 to 5, and Friday 1 to 5. And then it lists what the staff requirements there are for that. This would be at restored operation, so this would be an additional $321,000. We would be open 44 hours a week, a week, 5 days, Monday through Thursday, 9 to 7, Friday 1 to 5, and then the staff that it would take to staff those hours.
Jennifer,
And then that's together in a spreadsheet. Just so
do
you can
both
see.
those slides, let me see if I can recap it.
You want me to go back?
No, I think I can get it off
Okay.
of there. At your current level of operation, the city would need to come up with about another $47,000 to keep Bolden Weaver operating at that level. If you went to what you call a restored operation of 44 hours a week, that number gets multiples of that and becomes $321,000. What
think I would.
how do we evaluate what usage? I mean, your challenge is, as a library director, is to provide services.
Right.
And as a library director, with funding that comes from other people, you have to target where you hit your market when they're available to be hit, and where if you're opening a gas station and you're open from 8 a.m. to 3 a.m. and you have no customers between midnight and 3 a.m., as a business owner, you scale that back. In that analogy with the Bolden Weaver branch, are there blank spots where this 44 hours
Let's see.
would be
Make
providing
sure.
service, but there's very minimal or no usage?
So if you go back and look, so here was sort of the conundrum we found ourselves
Okay.
in. People are coming in as soon as we open.
Okay.
So, and they use, but then it drops off, and then you can see just after lunch, it peaks and goes back up. So, it just depends on how you want to provide the service for this community.
What about your evening hours? Are they
We
well
close,
utilized, heavily utilized, marginally utilized?
that has dropped off, and we've never been open past 7 at Weaver, correct?
Okay.
Is it, and again, I know you've looked at this, and I apologize, I have a large gap of knowledge of what you do every single day. Why not look at your hours on a Saturday? Because there's transportation, public transportation decreases dramatically. Would it be better to have 2 days closed during the week and have maybe Saturday and Sunday open?
We've definitely looked at that. Right now, staffing issues are gonna be the biggest problem.
Being able to get someone to work Saturday or Sunday?
Well, both of those, and being able to afford them, with our
But-
current budget.
But what if you assume the
You're
restored,
right.
assume the restored budget? And again, I'm being theoretical here, I apologize for my ignorance.
No.
Would it be better to have Wednesday through Sunday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday? Or-
It would be an option, and and Marty might can speak better to that. It is something that we have looked at, even at our Brown location.
It is something we've talked about many times in the past, and it always came down to staffing. We looked early in 2018, I think we started really looking at opening some on Saturdays, but you have to have a certain number of employees there, and then if you're staffing the rest of the week as well, that's what it
But
came
what
And the
if you
biggest
eliminated,
overlay-
though,
Well, the biggest overlay is gonna be the programming that we do in the schools, throughout the week. And that's where we don't have enough to stretch it into enough staff on a Saturday.
the program
Say
comes
that
out
one
of
more
Weaver?
time. Jenna, say that one, the biggest overlap.
So we have, one of the reasons we closed on Mondays at Maine and then Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Weaver branch. So we're doing programs out in the schools mostly, but we also go to different childcare centers. We also go to retirement homes and places like that. So when we do that, we have to send a certain, number of people depending on what we're doing. If it's a STEM program or if it's a, story time is a little different because you'll have someone who does this story time, and someone who usually does craft, music, that sort of thing. But the STEM, typically we can divide a classroom up or a group of children up into about 3 to 5 per adult. But anything kind of beyond that, it kind of gets a little out of control, I guess is the best word for it.
Okay. Don't you have a slide that shows the head count for Bolden Weaver?
For total, yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
not-
Yes, I left
Over
everything.
the years, because my memory is,
Now, this was door count from 2018 and then 22, but it also in correlation with the hours that they've been open. So I think it's important to note the decrease in hours where you see the dip.
where was that?
So COVID, obviously, 19, 20.
20.
Yeah. in 20, right?
20
Yes, and then,
is when the hours went down to the 22.
that's right. Well, I don't know exactly when we went down to 22, but it's obviously,
So that was the beginning of a decline, and then in
Right.
2021, you saw a adjustment going back up, trending.
that's right. And I do think the biggest thing to look at is that it is trending up. There is the potential for all of these people to come back to the library and the door counts to go back to what they were.
So in 2022, we only had 600, is that what, am I reading that right? 600 people come through the door?
It's not quite
800?
back one. Let's see. No, I'm going the wrong way again. Here.
So in 22, we had 16,000 come through the door.
Well, what showed on the chart? I'm kind of like.
It's more of a
Mary.
graph. It's a graph, and I don't think those numbers.
Because I'm kind of like the mayor, I would have looked at
Right.
that chart and said, okay, my door count in 22 was, I don't know, maybe 700.
About
Yeah.
700.
West side. Oh.
This, so you've got, it's a dual,
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So the line graph is.
Oh.
The line graph is on the left and the bar graph is the hours on the right.
yeah,
All right.
Yeah.
sorry.
We probably needed to.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Crawford.
All the way upset.
Just a conceptual question for me, because I know that right now we're looking backwards to say, we've got two issues in my mind. One of them is, what do we owe for the services provided that we've committed to do, right? That's one. And then going forward, what is the best way to serve all kids in the library, right? Weaver Golden and whatever else. One of the things that I know we've talked about when I met with you and Brian is a strategic plan that y'all are gonna present to us and talk to us about that. In that strategic plan, will there be a recommendation to say, we should do, to maximize the kids, you bring us a plan that says to get the most kids in both libraries, really, we need to do blank. Are we gonna see that? I mean, like Weaver Bowl, to me, if we say, maybe the optimal number to get kids in there is 30 hours, it's not 40 hours, I don't know, because the kids are coming at certain hours of the day. I'm totally talking about something I don't know a lot about,
No,
okay?
yeah.
But I mean, if you bring a plan and you say, the library needs to be open, Weaver Bowl needs to be open 30 hours, I'm just saying, that's gonna reach the maximum amount of kids. That's what I think we should fund.
My
What is-
ultimate, and I thought a lot of it about this after the last meeting.
I don't know, that's my, and the same
As the
thing.
director of the
Yeah.
library, because this is what I do for a living and what I'm passionate about. I mean, my recommendation would be to fund it $25 per capita, all locations.
Okay.
I think there's
$25.
$25 per capita, and that's a collective with
Aren't
the
we-
county and the
aren't we at
North Fork,
17?
right around, yeah.
You talking about per citizen?
And that would allow you to have all the programs and the things that you need to reach the maximum
Right.
amount of kids, I guess, that's, but when you guys bring that strategic plan, we're gonna spend a little time going over that and saying, this is kind of
Yes.
what we propose, and this is what we think we need.
I didn't include any of that in here just because it's been, with the various meetings, it's kind of getting a little muddy. So I wanted to kind of focus
Yeah.
on Weaver for this specific meeting, but yes, and I did bring, you know, we have spreadsheets where we've started mapping it out, what it would look like and how we can get there, either with the other entities as well.
So going back to what you had initially, we had talked about, in order to meet the city's obligation to what is already passed, it was about $49,000 or $50,000, right? Based on the hours are open, or is it more now?
No,
Well, how
to
much
fund
was
it as is right now at 22 hours a week,
47.
that's just to make up for the deficit
Okay.
for how we're operating right now.
For
It's
how-
49.
For, yeah,
So at a full 44 hours, it would be
300.
wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah, but just thinking out loud, go ahead.
yeah. No, I'm just saying, but the 49 is what is our obligation that we need to meet. You're saying that's, if we want to go to 100% open, that's what the cost is gonna be.
And it's just,
Yeah.
this is just for Weaver, right?
That's correct.
Just for
It's
Weaver,
just
that's
for
right.
thinking out loud, I can tell you what I would like to do as I begin to get a grasp on this and see what Mr. Wilson, Mr. Crowe think. What I'd like to do is meet you halfway in the middle the first year. Okay? And let's see if that turns the curve up.
Okay.
And if it does, and if it shows the demand's still there, let's feed it the second half next year. Gentlemen, where are y'all on that? I'm talking about on the operating side.
I think that's as fair as any way to look at it, and I know we always say, what are our other funding partners gonna do, because the difference we're gonna make is gonna be more, but I mean, it'll be a lot more if Northport and the county join us, and hopefully they will.
So what I'm thinking is where we'd have,
Yeah.
so if we increase that funding for the coming year, and we show the line turns up correspondingly or even more, we know to feed it more. But if not, if something's changed, if COVID marked a change that doesn't resume back to the norm, then we need to know that and pay attention to it.
And we are looking at things, models specifically more for Maine, just due to the traffic flow, but we're looking at ways to sort of streamline staffing, and we have a plan to go to self-check machines at the front desk and redistribute those staff to be able to go out into the programs and things like that, so that we can then repurpose those people back to where they need to go.
So when you look at the data of pre-COVID, let's say 3 years prior to COVID, did you see a trend going upward?
Oh, absolutely.
So, and the reason I asked that question is because my concern would be everybody is readjusting
That's right.
to post-COVID. And so even if you said, yeah, let's fund it halfway, it's gonna take longer to get to that efficient number because of the fact that the longer you stay out, the longer it's gonna take them to get back. But then if you go ahead and fund it all, you give a quicker way to possibly get to your efficient number quicker. That's just my perception.
I think the hard part about whatever, well, they give us I hope they'll just give us a roadmap of what makes sense for year one, because I think we'll come to some common sense solution without it.
Man, I jump in here for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, there's an inefficiency, which you pointed out last week.
Right.
You know, where we're spending so much on this branch for a low percentage to return. And on a global scale, it doesn't really make economic sense, being an economics guy. But I think when you talk about, and I think you've all done this and felt this, when you look at this, when it comes to children, if you change 50 kids, or as a good book says, you know, in that one place in the book, 40 or 30 or 20, if you change one kid's life that grows up to find the cure for cancer because he had this library opportunity, that's what we're looking at. Now, in terms of the other partners, understand that this is just the city, okay? We've got our work to do with respect to Northport and the county as to the main branch. But I want you all to understand one other point of that, is that if we're pulling stuff away from the main branch to handle this, okay, because we're not fully funded, then when we go the other places, they come back, and it's not so much county, you know, but there's always, well, if they're not fully funding Weaver Bolden, then why are we gonna fund Weaver Bolden? So there's a push and a pull, a yin and a yang here. My point is that I think ultimately you have to decide if you want to keep a Weaver Bolden at that inefficient level, or do you want to put all your resources into the library at the bottom of the hill? And that's a decision somebody's got to make. That's your money. That's the people's money.
Brian, does the county does a separate for the
They
Bobby
do a
Miller
separate
for the-
line item for the Bobby Miller Center.
Does
and
that
That 100% covers that.
and if it's like our situation, they would make up
Yeah.
that difference, right?
Right. Yeah, we actually ran those numbers just like we did these after the mayor spent a great deal of time with us walking through this the first time back in November, I think. We spent a great deal of time, and Jennifer and her team went through line by line, and we went back and checked it line by line to see where we were and how we were. So I think that the Brown branch at Bobby Miller Center is fully funded. Now, that doesn't make them equal to you fully funded here at Northport. I don't want to
Brown
bring
Center
that up right
operate at 44 hours.
No, no, they're not operating that much.
But they're not at a deficit right now.
They're not.
Mr. Busby, if I can, recommend maybe a direction to help move this discussion forward, in two parts. One, I think the agreement that we have with Para for the tennis center to me is a model that we could potentially replicate here. At the end of the year, Para sends us an audited statement of whatever the operational loss is at the tennis center, and the city funds that. I think in previous years, it's been as high as around 200,000. That number can fluctuate just depending upon the actual cost, what we fund, and then any actual overages. To get us through fiscal year 23, I'd recommend that we fund whatever the end of the year overage is for the Weaver Bolden Library. So whatever that liability is.
End of the fiscal or?
So at the end of fiscal year, sometime in October, the library sends
Keep going.
the
I'm still with
CFO a statement and says, this is our, although it would be unaudited, this is as close as we can find to actual expenditures. And you funded 347 and the cost is 150 or 500,000, making up a number arbitrarily. And your deficit is 153,000.
Yeah.
And then we authorize a special appropriation to the library for that 153,000, similar to the way we do.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
With Para. The second thing, and I think this gets to not only the library, but when we talk about Para and other Metro-funded agencies, is we need to realign our calculus to have contracts that perform for services. I think, to be fair to Weaver Bolden and to the library as a whole, we need to contract exactly for the services we want, whether it's at Weaver Bolden or the library, and then we pay for those services. And that way.
Or the tennis center.
Or the tennis center, or any of these operational centers that we fund, instead of being generalized, have more of these, we are paying.
Intentionality.
Yeah, and we've done this with Red Mountain at the amphitheater. I think moving into that direction, and you can't do this overnight, but moving in this direction would be probably a good direction. And the library is actually small enough in terms of, there's really only two call centers were involved, the main branch and Weaver Bolden. It's probably something we could, I hate to use the word experiment because it's well, certainly more than that, but it could give us a good explore. Yeah. Might be a better way of doing it, and that way we can, you know at Weaver Bolden what you're contracting for, how many days a week, the type of services, and you're gonna pay for it. Same with the main branch. And that way you're not as dependent upon your other funding partners to having to match your per capita amount, if that makes any sense. And the library might be a good way for us to explore whether that is something that works for us and works for them, quite frankly, because it needs to work for you more than anything.
So, Mayor, that model for the appropriation at hand, that model would involve putting forth, 6 months left of 321, or what?
I hate to kick it to you. I think that's something we would want to hear from you. I mean, our initial thought process was the 44 hours, 5 days a week, and continue to collect the data. At the end of the year, it's probably going to cost us somewhere, if that is accurate, and I have no reason to think it's not, we're probably going to owe $250,000 higher when we get to a very close expense cost on that. But then in that meantime, the council can determine what exactly, based off data, you want at Weaver Bolden, how many days a week, how much it's gonna cost in the future. We've already made that commitment for this fiscal '23, and I think we have to, I believe we should honor that.
That's right.
And then, but let's figure out in the next few months, what do we really want from Weaver Bolden? How much do we want to pay, and what services do we want, and how much will that cost, and go from there. But I'll need y'all's help on that, especially the two counselors whose
Yeah.
district feeds into that.
Yeah, they could definitely take some community engagement.
I think we need to do that.
So
I think we need
I'm
more community.
conceptually on board. I'm still having trouble translating that into an actionable motion. Given we're 6 months into FY '23. Y'all are gonna come back to us in August for FY '24, Jack.
We wanna come back before, cause we wanna sit down and talk about global, so we
Okay.
so we have a plan going forward.
Okay.
Not, and.
I wasn't trying to elbow you out of the room,
I guess what I'm
Brian,
saying is.
but I mean, you're
y'all
coming
spend-
back for your full year
Right, right.
allocation.
But what I just wanna say is that we've got our arms around these numbers now, okay? I don't think we've ever really had that before. And, you know, the bottom line of this thing is that the big library, if our funding continues the way it's been, and no disrespect, the library never told you about this, we're not gonna be around much longer, because we just can't sustain what we're doing. So, you know, there's a point where it just drops off. So what we wanna do is, we wanna get together with one or some of you, you know, preferably in finance, one of the three of you, or the council president, and say, hey, here's what we would like to do, here's our proposed plan, help us get this, because then we've got to also get their other funding partners on board with it too. Like y'all did with the, I always say dog pound, I know I'm not supposed to say that. Animal show.
I'm in the dog pound. Okay, but Brian, so here, I'm still conceptually, I'm drawn to what you outlined there. Where I'm having trouble is translating it into actionable motion to get a check cut. So under that concept, help me out here, Norman, Matthew, and Mayor,
And I wanna.
to get that, to meet our obligations that we committed to, which we're gonna do, and then to get Weaver Bolden hopefully back on the growth path,
Right.
but use that period to evaluate exactly what is it we wanna get out of that funding. In your model, is that what the remaining 6 months of this year are used for, or the 12 months of '24?
I think that it'd be just the last 6 months of this fiscal year, how many remaining months left in this fiscal year?
6.
And then, so you would authorize us to move in that direction. We would need a budget amendment, because we would have to, this is likely going, I assume we'll need a budget amendment, or maybe we could put it in we'd be obligating for fiscal '24 actually, because you'd be spending after fiscal '24, would you?
No, sir, the expense would be incurred in fiscal '23, so we would put that expense back to fiscal
So
'23.
then we would need a budget amendment of revenue.
So either we would do a budget revision and we could just pay it as it happens, or we would come back to the council, to the finance committee, and request an unbudgeted transaction release of funding. It's one or the other. You can either make the motion now, we can present a budget revision now for a motion for you, or we can do it later, and it would be an unbudgeted disbursement.
Here's what I would like to do, okay, right? So conceptually, let's pursue this. I would like to not have to work out the details of a motion right here. We've got, again, we got a lot, but, give us the week in between now and next week. Don't plan on having to present next week, but we'll try to work towards a vote on a motion next week that expresses what we've talked about, making up for anything we hadn't paid for, getting you funded back towards full operation,
Right.
but defining
where we're headed.
what the deliverables are.
That's right.
In exchange for that, it can be evaluated.
I think that's comparable, don't you?
So I think the technical, procedure here then is we'll table this until next week, but again, you shouldn't expect to be briefing or presenting next week. What should happen is, in conjunction with accounting and finance and us individual council members in the mayor's office, that we'll reduce that to an actual motion and we'll look to vote on it next week.
I think that, yes, sir.
One quick
Sure.
question. One quick question.
Sure.
I'm good with that.
Right now, to meet our obligation with where we are right now, because we're talking about, the stuff Walton's talking about, I think's great.
Right.
What are we talking about, probably money-wise? Are we talking about 300,000?
If we go back,
It depends on what you want, if we, to
We go back
continue
to
where
40.
we are right now, just to meet where we're doing, what we're doing right now would be
49.
this, right?
And
If
to
you
go,
wanna go to the other,
And that would be for the whole, because we're actually operating in the
yeah,
red.
that'd be for the whole year.
Okay,
So,
yes.
so
But
in
if
other
you-
words, that 321 would be about half, is that for a full year,
Right, well,
right?
that's for the full year.
So
yes,
you'd be half of that. So you're talking,
160.
yeah, maybe,
okay,
you know, I think that's what we ought to
yeah.
do.
Okay.
Totally, that'd be about half
So-
that number to
Ms.
get to the next
Standridge?
budget.
Would your team craft us up, and you and I can talk about it on Thursday in our pre-finance meeting, craft us up a motion that expresses that?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just so that I'm authorized for this, so what we would do, we would be working with OCA to create a funding agreement that would basically say all of this in writing. But we could either create a budget revision now for the $160,000, or we could wait and do an unbudgeted disbursement. I'd rather do a budget revision, but again,
Let's see the
that's
budget.
Budget.
up to council.
Yeah.
Could we do this
Yep.
procedurally, this is acceptable, next week, you authorize a funding agreement between the city and special funding agreement between the city and TPL regarding Weaver Bolden Library with the things we've outlined.
Correct, and the roofing's gonna appear in the capital budget, or
On
the
the
capital
18th.
presentation on April 18th.
Yes, sir. And then, as part of that next week, we will also have a corresponding budget amendment to go with the authorization.
Yes,
And then
Mhm.
we can we can either double it up if it's approved, or put it on the following week, I guess that'd be April 4th.
if it's approved, I don't have a problem with doubling it up. Do you, Norman?
No, I think we can do it.
Do it.
Let's do
Okay.
it. And it's good
Thank
for the
you,
children.
thank y'all very much. It has
Thank y'all for
been,
being here.
Thank y'all.
Yes,
Some of,
Second,
the motion be at the table for 1 week.
moving second.
all right.
All
Second.
in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, table for a week. Thank you, Jennifer,
Thank
Brian,
y'all.
appreciate
Thank
y'all
y'all.
coming in. Whew, New business, item number 2, approval of disbursement from District 1 improvement
Yep.
funds.
Yes, sir,
Councilman Wilson.
Mr. Chair, I would like to utilize some of my district funds to give to various agencies totaling $1,800, $500 to Building Bridges, which is at New Heights, $500 to the Northridge Band, $300 to West Alabama Falcons football, and also $500 to the Ivy Foundation, who are working with teens and providing them with tutoring, physical training resources, and financial literacy.
Any questions?
Motion to approve.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, disbursement from District 1 improvement funds is approved. Ms. Standridge, general fund budget revision number 10.
Good afternoon, council.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Moving right along, this is general fund budget revision number 10, and I'm really surprised that we're only at number 10 for as far along in the year as we are. This budget revision is requesting basically a two-folded transaction. When we did the 2022 C bond issuance for McWrights Ferry Road, that issuance then creates one interest payment that we were going to pay this fiscal year. And so when we were issuing that debt, we knew that there was going to be some timing issues related to interest expenses depending on when that was actually going to be issued. The total amount of interest that's going to be coming up due in fiscal '23 is $803,675. TCRIC fully reimburses us for all of those interest and debt service expenses, and so we're just going to be creating a cost reimbursement revenue line item for that amount, and an interest expense budget line item in the exact same amount, so a wash in and out. Related to the contract that we already have, the full funding contract that we already have with TCRIC.
Why were we not able to project the interest at the budget time?
We hadn't done the bond issuance at the budget time. We knew what the interest would be, we didn't know what the timing of
We
it
didn't
would
know what
be.
the timing would be?
We didn't know if the interest payment would be in June or on October 1, so this is when we actually did the issuance, and the timing was set for the agreement that we had with all of the bondholders. This is the timing that actually ended up. Knowing that everything's gonna be covered by the TCRIC funding agreement anyway, I mean,
What's the lag between typically when they repay it?
the next month's agenda, they will actually have a check usually for us there.
All right,
Motion approved.
Second?
all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Budget revision number 10, don't jinx us, is approved. Water and sewer reserve for item number 4, water and sewer reserve for future improvements, budget revision number 3, Ms. Stanley.
As Ms. Michael briefed you a little bit on, the lift station that we have taken on that needed some repairs, is lift station number 76. This item is requesting to create a cost reimbursement line item with the developer of that property that we're then taking over the lift station for. They are going to be paying us for some of those, to execute some of those repairs for the lift station. So this is just creating a cost reimbursement revenue line item for that developer payment in, and then creating the project's line item for the expenses of all the repairs.
Okay, gentlemen, any questions?
Motion to approve.
Second?
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, item is approved, Ms. Sanders. Item number 5, authorization to submit grant application for the BJA FY23 Justice Mental Health Collaboration Program.
Yes, sir.
Ms. King,
Yes, sir.
welcome.
This is a grant done by the Bureau of Judicial Assistance, specifically designed for funding the creation of mental health court programs. Some of you may remember about 2 years ago, I was here talking to you about mental health court. I know Mr. Tyner has been involved in our sort of our steering committee related to that, but we have certainly had some issues finding funding for things in the past, and that's what we talked about from the beginning. There's always issues like that, but this is a great opportunity in which the federal government funds a 3-year grant to allow the creation and then partially fund the operation of it. If you'll notice, you should have in your packet information related to the amounts that we're talking about in this case. It's 3 years. There's escalated match funding. The first 2 years are 80% federal, 20% city, and then the final year is 60% federal, 40% city. And you
so
can kind
our
of see those
portion
lined
of
up.
that, Ms. King, would be what?
So on the first year, our portion would be a maximum of $20,000. For the second year, it would be a maximum of $25,925 based on our budget. And then for the final year, the maximum would be $50,740. So obviously it is escalating, but they do cover quite a bit. I mean, if you look at the numbers covered by the federal government in that as well, it's, you know, the second year's over 100,000.
What do we do with that, the total grant?
So that's a great question. The mental health court would be established, and it's a way to
The mental health
court.
Court.
Yeah, it would be established through our municipal court, and it would be a court designed to take individuals with mental health issues that have come into contact with the criminal justice system and give them an opportunity for a lot of different things. But one of those things is a diversion, so that they don't end up in jail or with convictions. If we can divert them onto a different path and provide them with services, that does not only help them, but helps the city as well. Because another huge goal of this is to get some of our more frequent participants with the police departments into a different path. A lot of these,
What
I'm
would
sorry.
that path be?
So that's a great, okay. So we would have 2 people. One would be a clinical level social worker and therapist. That would be through Indian Rivers. That person can provide therapy, and Indian Rivers would also be able to provide medication. And then we would have a master's level clinician who would actually operate the program and work as a social worker operating this program, that person could do things like provide transportation, assistance getting Social Security benefits, assistance getting identification, so that some of the problems that these people run into without having, for example, housing or food availability, things that can aggravate mental health issues, then we could take the social worker and they could help with that, and then we could take them out of the community. This is the type of thing where it's somebody that ends up with 23 criminal trespass cases in a row because they're at the gas station yelling at people, right? That's what we want to target. We want those people, because that's a huge involvement for our police department. A disproportionate number of resources are spent on that. If we can target those people and put them in contact with providers, and then make sure there is both an incentive and a punishment if they fail, right? That there have to be both. There has to be an incentive to want to do this, but also the threat of a conviction or being placed in jail to ensure that we get compliance. When you combine those things, we can hope to get that person and those people on a different path that involves less involvement with the police and the court system as well.
Okay.
I think
So
that's
when you say a municipal court,
Yes.
are we creating another judge?
No,
You
sir.
said, you talked
Yes,
about two positions.
Yes, sir.
That would be funded, who are social worker, therapists, right?
Yes. This would be through Judge McKinney.
Through Judge
Yes,
McKay.
it
And
would
it's
be-
through Indian Rivers and,
in the city in combination. So, and we've spoken with Indian Rivers about it, but they would be both. And they've got a court similar to this for the felony level. They have drug courts in the felony level, and they have a mental health court at the felony level as well. We just don't have anything to address those issues when somebody gets a lot of misdemeanor cases.
So let me ask you this question, because I see the same person over and over again. With proper intervention, could get some type of normalcy. How would they follow the individual?
So the person, the master's level clinician,
Right.
would be a case manager. So
Yes.
we're not talking about a huge number of people here, right? This is
we're not-
probably 20 to 30 maximum people at any given time. There'll be a
Right.
rotation, obviously, as people go through it.
Yeah.
But that person will be charged with, the person who's running this program will be charged with going to the home of the individual that we're talking about, meeting with them in their home, with their families, getting their families on board with intervention as well, if possible. And then they would have repeated court dates. So we would create, if a subject of this, we would be asking the council, if we got this, to create a new docket for that as well. Kind of like we have a veterans court now. It would be very similar. We would have just another docket date, and that person would have to come in every single month, and their social worker would report on whether or not they're in compliance. And if they're not in compliance, there would be obviously consequences related to that. That's sort of the carrot and the stick end of it. But that's how they would be followed up. The social worker would directly work with these 20 to 30 individuals at any given time. Like I said, we envision this being very hands-on.
Kim, is this budget part of what we give that Mary kind of manages and over in the court? Judge McKinney's, how is this gonna be paid for?
So I believe that would,
If we get the grant, but we have to match
Well, we have
up.
to
right,
match it.
and I believe that would have to be allocated through the fiscal year 24 budget, but I would have to refer
Is that
to
right?
Carly on that one.
We are also seeking an amendment to our diversion, what am I calling
the diversion funding. I was
Diversion
thinking the same
funding.
thing. I know the chief's gonna start
So
squirming over there, but
we
this
have
would
a-
seem a very
we have
logical place
roughly
around it.
more than $750,000 that we've been unable to spend because the legislation makes it very difficult for us to expend it. I think Scott did a good job of talking about this at the legislative breakfast. Our hope is that the legislature will allow us to amend that to use this for mental health court services.
So we already basically have the money, we just gotta have authorization.
I like it.
Yes,
In some way.
that would
That's
be
good.
the logical next step for us. And I can't say enough about the committee that Mr. Tyner has chaired and Kim has done the work on to get us to this.
It's a big problem.
Hey, any
Yes.
other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Kim, so let's say for instance you have a young master's level student that he or she is a social worker, and they're ready to do this job. are you gonna pair them with, someone that's more experienced?
Yes, because
Yeah.
master's and then clinical level
Yeah.
will have both.
Yeah.
The master's is going to be the more hands-on person, but clinical, and again, I don't understand all of the different designations, but I know clinical
Yeah.
requires quite a bit more work
Uh-huh.
and more experience, and I
Yeah.
believe time in. So we'll have both available, and they would be working with Indian Rivers.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's quite a bit of experience over there as well. So it wouldn't be that we just put them out there on an island by themselves to deal with this. We also have some experience with this within the city already. Brianna Jones over at EMS Prevention does a lot of work helping people. And it won't be overlap with that because she doesn't deal with stuff that is exclusively mental health related. But their program can show you a lot of what we do hope to accomplish, which is we can intervene early on to stop repeated involvements.
Right.
And she does a lot of that.
By part of Indian Rivers, you already have clinicians on site. They have shot clinics on Fridays, Thursdays, things of that nature. So they can, it's already set up. So you can run that for them. Probably fun.
Yes, sir.
Down.
Yep.
Need a motion to approve.
Second.
I'll make it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
King, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I can take just a moment to let y'all know, Kim King in our office does a phenomenal job. I know she's not somebody that you guys get to see often. She has worked on this tremendously above and beyond her normal workload, which I can assure you is plenty. This is something she worked on a couple years ago that with her new duties and assignments, she could have absolutely stopped working on and nobody would have noticed. But just for her passion for this will be a tremendous benefit for the city.
I like
and
your
our
chart.
citizens.
Oh, I like your chart now.
Yeah. Busby,
I like your
he
steps
was-
now.
flips. I told him to ask for a raise.
Wait, item number 6. UA partnership funding discussion in Northington Access Board. So I see you're the official Stuckey, Ms. Standards, but I would expect Summer and Brendan, if he's in here, to be a part of this conversation
Come on,
too.
Summer.
She can't take all the shots by herself.
Well, I mean, this is really just the funding discussion. And so my general proposal, and, talking through all of this with Summer as well, in order to not hold up the process, and to be able to award a, funding agreement possibly with UA if it does pass through the, full council, that currently Snow Hinton Park has a full $5 million budgeted for it within the, 2022A bond issuance as it was presented to council and approved at the time of issuance. That $5 million has yet to be encumbered in any way or spent in any way. We know that it's coming. Obviously, there are professional services contracts that will need to be awarded very soon. However, knowing that the upcoming capital project proposal is slated for April 18th, that will usually set everything right in all of these large capital projects. I really say that we don't necessarily need a funding change as of right now to be able to award the contract with UA for them to move forward on this project
We're
right
gonna
now.
award the contract with UA to do what? To manage the program or
No,
to-
so this portion is for the Aldott right-of-way on McFarland, the area that they're gonna build the new road on Northington, and then the section that we will, chip in our money for, basically. They will take, care of the design fees, management of the project, bidding the project, inspections, all of that, and that's included in the funding agreement.
The utilities are gonna be underground too,
Yes,
right?
they are.
Yeah.
Now, are we paying for this out of money that was originally designated?
the $5 million.
So that's my proposal at the moment, is to pay for it currently with the money that was designated to fix the park. However, knowing that we're about to do a full capital budget redo on April 18th, we will true all that up
Yeah.
at
So
that
we're not
time.
taking anything away from the park?
No, sir, no.
No, sir, it's very likely
Backfill.
that from the 7.5 million contingency that's embedded in the 22A, that we will ultimately use that to backfill the 1.3 million, plus, just for full disclosure, the Snow Hinton Park project is going to be over the $5 million budget,
Sure.
sans the 1.3. In some part too, because we are going to be recommending to the council to go ahead and do the full lighting and technology suite, even areas that are not scheduled for upgrades. We know that through the planning study and and through the responses we've received from surveys, safety was the number one concern. And we think if we can go ahead and do the lighting and security suite through the whole park, let's go ahead and do that today and get that good pricing, because we know 2 years from now that pricing will be higher. when we
Oh,
get to the
absolutely,
next phase.
I agree.
So the road is here,
Okay.
on this side.
Yes, I'm gonna try to see.
It's an awful road as it is now.
This is McFarland, so they will take care of the modifications here, they will do this section into the Chick-fil-A that will be
All right,
located
then.
here, and then we will take care of this section.
But there won't be any changes to McFarland Boulevard. That'd be the state.
There's a little bit of a widening up here, but it doesn't.
They're not gonna be able to cross over and get.
No.
Okay.
And I put together this slide, I know it's a little bit hard to see everything, but this is all of Snow Hinton, so we've got, a new entrance off of Park Road coming in, the
Looks good.
hospital monuments are still gonna stay, we make this gateway, we create this gateway here, ellipse, new
I like it.
restrooms, we're gonna replace the pavilion back here, this one's in pretty bad shape.
Yeah.
There's gonna be
Look at that.
family games, cornhole, bocce ball, all kinds of things
Oh,
back
really?
here. All kinds of landscape, new parking lots, we're gonna renovate this, pavilion here, and make it look, the elevate.
The road's gonna be closed back there, right? You won't be able to get through?
Well, the northern
Back
street?
here,
No. Right here, I know there's a parking lot. Will this still be open?
there is a way to get out, yes, but they won't be able to get back into here.
Okay, I get a lot of calls from people racing and cutting donuts and going, and I was thinking, if there's not an escape way, that might be better.
There's not, and there, we have a curb cut here to access our new parking areas across from the parking lot. But there, it's mostly curb and gutter and landscaped islands up to here. And then back here is just kind of, I need to talk to UA and make sure what we're gonna do back there.
But you will no longer have that cut through to the center
Yes,
up
it
there.
sits back here, yes. And then just, this is a couple things, this is gonna be the new restroom and pavilion. And these are
Okay.
just, imagery from the renderings, it's not nothing crazy yet. But this is our maintenance building. New pavilions, it won't look like this, but this is kind of the shape we're going for and kind of the style. It'll be our elevate colors on the roof,
That looks nice.
and then furnishing.
Are we gonna keep the rope climb thing?
For now, yes.
You gonna climb it?
That's good, that's the coolest thing out
Yes.
there.
Really?
Just saying,
It's gonna stay there, yes.
I've never made it to the top.
I've never tried.
It's
I'm
here,
nervous.
yes.
I had to be rescued. I got
I'll do
halfway
it when I
up.
turn 70, yes, I will do it.
you bring them
You've
out-
done it.
You bring them out from Marine Gauntlet Hospital.
Are you saying that our ladder trucks at the fire department?
I had to go get
work
ready.
down there, go rescue people from the
Oh,
fire?
yeah.
Mr. Fail, if I can get us out of here by 4:20, will that?
Sure. We should be short.
So, Ms. Standridge,
Yes, sir.
the 1 is it 1.3 plus 250? Or is the 250 and the 1.3?
For the underground utilities,
Right.
yes, sir, the 1.3 should be all encompassing.
And it's coming out of the 5 that we bonded heading towards Hinton. What was going to be this? Is this what was going to be?
The
Going
5
with that
million.
5 million?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I swear it seems like everything we touch, the estimates are coming in double. I mean, what was it?
There is over 100 lights out there that we're replacing with new decorative lighting coming in on the road. So that's a lot of the cost. The structures are expensive, the roadways, not expensive, but it's.
Yeah,
It's
the
just more
increase
expensive
you and
than
I
it has.
discussed briefly yesterday, this project, if you move out the University Road, is going to need probably an additional $3 million. Part of that is this project was a preliminary design before the Great Inflation. And that, we've seen that on every single one, most of our projects, major projects. The second cost factor, and again, we haven't gone to bids yet, so
Seen that on
we may,
eggs.
and we may see something else.
So,
We think adding the security functions and the lighting functions comprehensively, regardless of the phase, but throughout the entire park, it would be a wise decision to go ahead and do that at one time. Plus, we're gonna have a lot of opportunities with the Chick-fil-A opening. That's gonna drive a lot of people into this area. We hope they maybe get out, park their car, and walk around,
Some ice cream.
eat some ice cream, take a walk. But we want that, we want the lighting, security to make everyone feel comfortable and safe within that park. That is our central park of Tuscaloosa. It's kind of like downtown, it belongs to everyone. I know it's in your district, but it belongs to everyone.
Yeah.
And
Really all
and
there.
making people feel safe within that city
We all
center,
take credit.
we think it's important to go ahead.
My question was gonna be, just rough estimate, that 5 turns to 10.
Yeah.
If we thought we needed 5, if it's in line with what's been going on, it turns to 10. Just for conversational purposes, okay? If
I
we're
would say
taking,
I would say 9 million.
okay, just between friends now.
I'm gonna
Just
look at
take
the
$1.3
engineer
million
to provide.
out of the
Go ahead
5.
on, buddy.
We're now not 4 short, we're 6.3 short, right?
As I understand, Summer, please correct me if I'm wrong, 9 would be with the University
With
Road.
the
included.
road, yes.
All
Oh, okay.
All in, yes.
Yes.
That would include, again, this hasn't been bid,
No,
and so I know that, the bid price may show a different landscape than what we envisioned today. So, I mean, again, but this is what we know today based off the latest construction
But
estimates.
in big terms, just big crude macro level terms, if those surprises went out, is the thinking that we address that by reducing what we're buying or by coming up with more money to buy what we originally planned?
I think ultimately
That may be a rhetorical question, but
if you, to reduce the cost of this project down, would take off the major elements, you're talking about not redoing I guess that would be on the east side of the park, the major pavilion that's on the east side of the park that's closer to where Northington Elementary used to be. You would likely have to take out the lighting and camera package for the phase that's not, the other phases that are included in it. Certainly you'd have to, if we commit to the road now, so we couldn't take the road out, so if we commit to the road now, I don't know where else you would really want to cut unless you took out the ellipse, which was really embraced by the community itself. They gave it that signature.
And I wasn't asking for a deep, but the point I'm trying to make is almost every single project that we've encountered. Just pulling a number out of the wind, just say double, pedestrian bridges 5 or 6 to 11. And it just got, at some point, I'm afraid whoever's walking around the table to the last song is not gonna have a chair when the music stops playing. And that doesn't even require a response. We have to keep that in mind because that's the dynamic that's going on.
I do think, as you and I talked about, again, briefly yesterday, is that the musical chair analogy is absolutely apropos. That is a possibility if we do not adjust our timelines, and you will see that in our April 18th recommendation to you. The good news, though, is that many of these projects that we had slated in 24, 25, and even into 26 now have just by gravity slowed down. And so I think that's going to help tremendously on cash flow. The decision to pause the event center certainly it helps with cash flow. So that in and of itself gives us comfort on the 22A. Again, just for the sake of full disclosure, the $7.5 million that we have appropriated as the contingency amount, we're going, if we recommend the 4, which we likely will on April 18th, I don't want to give you a spoiler alert, but at this point, I think that would be our recommendation. I'll be recommending likely $2 million additional for one project and $1.2 million for another. You're going to probably have to allocate a little bit more from the next fiscal year Elevate budget. The good news, that's the bad news. The good news is a couple of these projects, Benjamin Barnes, Tennis Center, they're not slated to go to construction until fiscal 24. So that gives you a little bit of breathing room. On the 18th, we want to lay all that out for you so that you get that full picture, because you're right, if we don't amend what we have in place today, the music would stop for someone. I mean, some project.
All right, well, thank you. Norman, Matthew, you have any more questions?
No,
So
sir.
today was on the schedule for discussion. Carly, y'all want to draw us up a detailed revision that, how would we handle, what would we debit the elevate section
Well, and I guess that's my proposal, is that there's not necessarily a change to be made now. It will come with the April 18th, proposal. That's where the change will be made. I think really the only votable action right now is to move the UA contract and funding agreement forward.
Okay, are y'all gonna present us with that next week?
Do we need to bring that back on the
I mean,
finance
I'd like to
committee?
see it.
The one where, because I think if Tim Leopard wanted to come back for, projects next week, maybe that would be best for final.
Yeah, I don't.
We can
Final
double that.
passage.
We can
I don't
double
mind
We
if
can
we
do that.
double it up,
Yeah.
but I'd like to see
Back to
Okay.
project,
What
we'll
the-
vote.
the agreement is, and we can plan to vote next week.
The projects too.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
have a breakdown provided with everything on there so you can see it.
Perfect.
gentlemen, is there any other, so we don't need to table anything, that was just
No, sir.
discussion. It'll appear as a new item next week.
Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, any other business?
Motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.